Well, I am very sorry to interrupt that beautiful piece from Mozart's Requiem called Lacrimosa. It's one of the most gorgeous choir pieces I think it's ever been written. It's a lovely piece for introducing our subject matter today, which is abuse bonding. I'm going to go ahead and read a few slides here for folks that can't look at the screen while maybe they're driving or running or something, and this will allow what's coming on the screen to be heard without it actually having to be looked at. And then if you could see the screen, just follow along. All right, here we go. A wife in an abuse bond considers the physical punishment from her husband as deserved due to her disobedience. So in the same way, the Christian feels they deserve punishment for their disobedience, which put Jesus on the cross. These two situations are addressed by the same psychology. Identify through the punishment to absolve the threat. A good historical example of this bond is described by Stockholm Syndrome from Wikipedia. Quote, Stockholm Syndrome consists of strong emotional ties that develop between two persons where one person intermittently harasses, beats, threatens, abuses, or intimidates the other. Stockholm Syndrome's significance arises because it is based in paradox. When a victim holds the same values as the aggressor ceases to be perceived as a threat. Victims of the formal definition of Stockholm Syndrome develop positive feelings towards the aggressor and sympathy for their causes and goals. The perpetrator of the abuse in Christianity's case is Yahweh, who demands an impossible feat from the convert, a sinless life. How is Yahweh's unachievable demand for purity resolved? By identifying with him through the guilt and shame of Jesus on the cross. This means Christianity requires an abuse bond to exist. The convert is in a paradox because life teaches through mistakes, but mistakes bring the convert short of the glory of God. The convert is both the receiver of the impossible demands of Yahweh and the one who makes Jesus suffer. This is psychological double jeopardy, and there's no exit strategy for it in Christianity. It is fear which keeps the convert from being willing to see this situation objectively, just as fear keeps the abused wife from seeing her situation objectively. To actually take this consideration to heart, the convert must abandon their life baseline, but they won't abandon it because they have been instructed to be afraid of going to hell, so they never attempt any serious options. The only thing that binds the Christian down is their own enchanted mind. An abuse bond that I love to use as an example is the abused spouse. And the reason why I like to use that example is because I think it's very common. And so I think a lot of people can identify with it because it's common. And so therefore they can understand it if it's explained to them. And we all would definitely agree that it's completely wrong. And in any person that is being abused, whether it's psychologically abused or physiologically abused or both, or manipulated or used, all of us, any decent, compassionate human being would say that's not okay. And that person needs to get out of that relationship. They should not continue to enable it by staying in the relationship if there's a way for them to get out of it. Okay, so we all would agree then if we identify a situation where a person is in that abuse relationship that they need to get out of it, then if you can identify that within your own life, then you have to ask yourself some seriously difficult questions. Because you've already agreed, or you already understand and completely know that if you saw someone being abused, you would say, that's not okay. You would step in, like if it's your best friend and your best friend shows up and she's got a black eye, and you say, what on earth happened? And, again, and they say to you, as we go ahead and look at it, and they say to you, well, I totally screwed up. He had asked me to feed the dog in the morning, and I didn't feed the dog. I totally forgot. And so the dog, got these stomach cramps and, whatever, there's an issue. And he got really upset at me and it's just a lesson I needed to learn. And you, as the best friend, would be mortified looking at your best friend. And you would be like, okay, listen. Okay, listen. You have a black eye. Okay. You show signs of clear abuse. Your spouse is harming you. You don't even see the black eye. And their response literally is, thank you so much. I totally love you. Thank you for your compassion. And the reason they're going to continue to give excuses without my continuing on in the example, the reason why they continue to give excuses is because they identify the harm that's done to them as love, okay? They have learned in that relationship that is how things go. This is how they enable the abuse to continue. It's because they don't see it as abuse. So they're not making excuses in their head for it, in the sense that you are in the outside looking in, the triangulation of the situation, saying, hey dude, I'm over on this other side, this other planet over there, and I'm looking in and saying it's totally abuse. And they're like binoculars, and their psyche is wearing these binoculars, and they only see the love when it comes from a place of harm or sorrow. That's how they identify with love, is through that gateway. This is why they stay in their relationship. This is why they will not come out of it. And even when you shake them and tell them you are being abused, all this stuff, give them all this stuff, the more examples you give them, they see as more examples of where they are screwing up, where they are a mess up. And they think they're bringing harm to the relationship. They think they are the one who is causing it because, I keep screwing up. I keep making these mistakes that they ask me, not to make, or they keep giving me things to do and I keep messing up and I don't do them, or I forget, or whatever. And so they see this punishment as deserved. And then also that discipline to them is love. This person has completely taken their life and they have compartmentalized everything so that they disassociate from all these different compartments that they have generated in their psyche, which allows this abuse syndrome to continue. Okay? Now that description, okay, is what is happening psychologically in the relationship of the wife who's receiving the abuse and the husband who is giving the abuse. He does it because he has complete control of the individual, right? And he doesn't have a conscience in the sense of he doesn't identify this punishment that he is putting upon this person as abuse. He sees it as, you deserve this because you're not obeying me. You're not doing what I'm telling you and asking you to do. And so he sees their activity as insubordination for the relationship. And so they deserve it, absolutely, in their head. So it's this sadomasochistic thing that's going on here psychologically, okay? This is the syndrome. Okay, now just take that picture, please. Just take that picture and just place it upon the relationship that's happening in Christianity, okay? You have this authoritative father figure who has these demands of obedience, these demands of, you must accept this gift that I'm giving you called love, called grace, and this individual is taking and categorizing the abused individual's life, and they've separated and categorized things out into sin, into not sin, into gender, into all of these different categories and subcategories, so that all of life is fragmented, okay? And this disassociates. This is the same disassociation that's happening in the wife is happening in the convert, okay? And it's because the convert is identifying love from the Father through the sin syndrome with grace as the slather that allows this energy to be able to potentiate between these two energy spheres. This is exactly what's happening in Christianity. And the abused individual, okay, they identify with Jesus
through sin, through the cross, through forgiveness. It only happens through that. And so that is the conduit through which they identify to God. This is the syndrome. And so the person identifies their sin. That's the demand in the relationship. They identify the forgiveness of their sin as grace. That's the love. The love comes through the grace because what? They don't deserve it. Just like the abused spouse. She identifies with the love through the punishment that she is getting because she keeps disobeying. The sin, the convert, they keep sinning. They identify with God through this syndrome of guilt. That's why they demand that there must be sin. There cannot be a world without sin. It can't exist. That's why, because if sin doesn't exist, then there's no guilt syndrome. There's no way to identify to God. There's no cross. There's none of these things are there. And so when you just remove that, all of a sudden the person is completely and totally left in space. Because now these two spheres that have been circling each other round and round and round, right? God and the individual, the convert, all of a sudden, there's no more center of guilt, sin. That doesn't exist anymore. And so now all of a sudden, they've flown off into outer space. And that's why the Christian cannot for the life of them, cannot see this. Just like the abused spouse, she cannot see it. She cannot see that the black eye she has is abuse. The convert cannot see life without sin disassociating them from God, and they're having to milk that by going back and getting relief, by going back and admitting sin, by going back and going through this whole syndrome over and over again, guilt. And then you have the people who quote unquote, graduate from that. They think they have. So this person no longer even sees themselves as sinful. Now they have completely categorized that out, dismissed it as far as the east is from the west, and now they see themselves as fully identified to God, right? But how do they see it? They see it through grace. That saved a wretch like me. These people who think they've graduated are still singing every Sunday, that saved a wretch. Well, why are you a wretch if sin doesn't exist? If you're not identifying through sin, then why are you singing praises in this term wretch towards yourself as a way to God? It's the same thing as the abused spouse. The black eye, she is seeing that as the access to her husband's love. This is the convert who is seeing their sin as the access to God's love. Do you see that? These are identical syndromes. Do not kid yourself or dismiss it or just say, no, this guy's just having a syndrome himself or he's crazy, whatever. Don't do that. Take the core logic that I'm giving you and think it through. And then you have to ask yourself, if this is the ultimate spiritual system that the God of the creator of the universe offered to humanity to understand him, if that is indeed the system, why on earth is it so catastrophic to the human psyche? Seriously. I'm actually physically trembling telling you this. That's how much energy is coursing through me right now. Because you have to ask that question if you're ever going to grow up from the position that you have been indoctrined into. If that individual who is being abused by that spouse, if that is ever going to stop, she's going to have to stop enabling it. That's the only way. You can yell at her until she's blue in the face, until she comes to terms with the reality of the situation. There it is. If this is the ultimate way to God, why on earth does it center around guilt and sin? Because you cannot have grace without sin. The reason for grace is sin. Because you know what it's called without grace? That's called unconditional love. That's what unconditional love is. There's no requirement of grace because there's no requirement of sin for the love to exist. And as a Christian, what you have to do, if you're ever going to dismiss yourself from a relationship that is inappropriate, that is harming your psyche, whether or not you believe that or think that or not, just like the abused wife, she's not sitting around thinking how much she's being harmed. She's thinking about how much she's being loved, and the more punishment she gets. And the Christian is thinking the same thing. The only way you're going to escape from that syndrome is the same way a drug addict is ever going to escape from their syndrome. And that is, you must triangulate yourself from it and look at it and say, you know what? These two syndromes are exactly as he's explained. They are. And both are inappropriate. It doesn't matter which way you cut it. It's like math. It's like 1 and 1 makes 2. This is an abuse relationship that is completely a victim-perpetrator bond. And this other is a victim-perpetrator bond. They're identical. And they're both inappropriate. 1 and 1 makes 2. So you can't escape that. It doesn't matter which Christian lens you look through. You can't escape the syndrome that is required for you to activate, to engage, to be able to have relationship. And so it is constantly keeping you from identifying because you're fidgeting with it. It doesn't matter which way you cut it when you say, no, Chuck, I'm not fidgeting with it, actually. I'm completely dismissed myself from sin. I don't even see myself as a sinner anymore. I've completely graduated from that. I am now above that. I am above that plane. And it's the same thing as the abused wife saying, you're completely crazy. This is not abuse at all. I am completely being loved by this person, and how dare you come in and try and stop this? Because I'm actually quite happy. I'm fine with it. I'm learning my lesson. I'm a better person every day because of it. It's the same thing a sinner is saying. I'm a better person every day because of all of these things that all this guilt I have to work through. It makes me a better person, and somehow that's supposed to make you behave better. And it doesn't. The threat of hell, the threat of punishment has never kept anybody from disobeying. Ever. Ever. Because it doesn't work that way. The human psyche doesn't work that way. That's not how it learns. It learns through identity. It learns through nothing getting in the way between the individual and identifying with God. In other words, there's nowhere to look. If you're looking for God, it's like looking for God. It's like looking for your glasses when you're wearing them. I don't know how else to say it. And if you're putting dirt in there called sin, that's your problem. You're in the syndrome, just like the wife that's getting punished. She is continuing to allow it to happen by not leaving. So it's going to keep happening. He's certainly not going to stop. He's got her completely under control. God has you completely under control, so you think. But yet you keep sinning. And you can't escape that because we all make mistakes. That's part of life. So when you put this guilt syndrome attached to it, you are completely anchored down. Your spiritual intellect, your potential, the intrinsic nature within you, its potential to transcend is the spiritual intellect. How much potential is there to transcend when transcendence requires you to feel guilty? People, you have to look at this practically. I began to have this conversation one time with a counselor at I'm not going to say where, with a Christian counselor. This guy, by the time he left my office, said, I wish I had never talked to you. Because I turned it all upside down. Because if you're a really thinking person, I know every single psychologist is, they sit around and they think about junk like this. I know they all are. When you really think about it, you are going to know. You're going to see it. You're going to absolutely see it. Because it's required. And make every excuse as you want, just like that wife is making every excuse that you want. You both are enablers. You both are allowing and you both are giving the energy for it to be released from the individual that's giving it, and then to be taken from the individual that's receiving it, who then gives it back through the enabling process. And there you go.